Okay, so it's 12:30, and just to make sure we get through everything, I want to get started now, which is why I turned on YouTube, even though I realized I have forgotten to post any of those videos for many weeks. I'm just a slacker. I just realized I set it up to record on YouTube every day, and then I never add the YouTube videos to the channel. Oops. So we got a couple of things that I want to go do today, and the first of these is I want to talk about our case study. So I'm going to start the case study now. Okay, this is kind of an open assignment, meaning you can work on this. The actual case study itself will not be due until, sorry, I'm just scrolling down here just a bit. Until the 11th. So that's about 2.5 weeks from now, if I'm doing the math. And I am actually willing to push that to the 18th. If anybody, if that's the general consent, I'm totally fine with that. But I want to kind of outline it now so that you can get started on it, although I'm not expecting anybody to leap into this assignment just yet. Does that make sense to everybody?
Do you want to repeat what you're willing to wait to the 18th for? I came in like right after you said what you were saying.
Okay, so the final assignment for this class, it's not the final exam, but the final assignment is a case study paper. Okay, and right now it's set to be due on the 11th. I'm okay with moving that to the 18th.
Cool, thank you. I just came in right, perfectly wrong spot.
I like the 18th better than the 11th.
I kind of figured that was going to be the case. So what I want to do today is introduce the assignment and explain what it is so that everybody can comfortably procrastinate for the next 2 weeks and get started. I joke. All right, so all of this information is located at the very top of the class under the section that says Case Study Guidelines. Okay, so if you click on this, it's going to take you to a long list of different pages, all of which are related to this assignment. And so I want to walk you through this so that everybody's on the same page as to kind of what you need to do and so that you can start thinking about this. Essentially, what I'm going to be asking you to do is the same thing we have been watching all semester long. Every Thursday, I have put up a clip of a video that introduces some type of ethical dilemma. Whether it's McDonald's and super hot coffee, the University of Alabama requiring students to buy Alabama branded textbooks, questions about privacy online, right? These are all illustrations of ethical dilemmas in real life. What I'm going to ask you to do is to create a written version of an ethical dilemma that relates to you. So, if at all possible, what I would really like to encourage is for you to consider a topic related to the field you're going to go into. Nuclear operations, or why don't you remind me what you're going into? Radiology, what have you, okay? Now, Zach had told me previously that he wanted to talk about an ethical situation that was coming up with some people that he knew. This could be an excellent topic to write a case study on. Now, I don't care if you work on these together or if you share ideas of topics, because you're still going to write it differently. Is everyone okay with this so far? All right, so let's take a look at the assignment. So the assignment is a case study of about 1,000 to 1,200 words. Typed, double spaced, that's about 2 to 3 pages. Okay, I'm going to say that I don't want it any less than 1,000, and I don't want it a lot more than 1,200. I do not want this to be a research paper. I do not want this to be a thesis. This is not a, I'm going to put my guts into this thing and write until my fingers bleed type assignment, okay? This is simply taking the concepts that we have covered over the semester and using them to demonstrate an awareness of how to analyze a situation for ethical challenges. And how do I negotiate it if I find them? Okay? Yes?
So is it kind of like presenting a certain situation?
Yes.
And then we say what we personally, like how we would handle it, like with ethical.
We're going to get into that.
Okay.
You're going to say, here's the situation and here's what makes it an ethical dilemma. Here's how different models would react. So from a utility, here's what the utilitarian might recommend.
Okay.
Here's what justice might recommend. Here's what deontology recommends. How would each group respond or react to that? Okay? All right, so similar to the examples posted in the textbook, the videos, I want you to investigate your chosen career field or one that's simply or similar to that, and identify a real example in which making a decision on how to act would require understanding ethical standards. Okay, I have a lot more to go through, but this is just the general introduction of what the assignment is. You're going to be graded on these 7 elements. Clarity of thought and support. The quality of your evidence and support. The inclusion of multiple individuals and their perspectives. So who might be individuals that would have perspectives, for example, on the McDonald's hot coffee video that we watched? Who might have perspectives on this?
The woman and the company.
The woman that was burned, the company as a whole, probably the local manager that was the one that actually turned the knob, right? Which might not be reflective of what corporate wanted. Other customers, especially customers who want super hot coffee. Managers of other businesses that also sell coffee, but who weren't sued. These are that's an illustration. Okay? The essay includes proper inclusion of at least 2 ethical strategies. Quality of writing, clarity of the potential consequences, and finally, proper citation of sources. Does anybody have any questions so far? All of this is posted in Moodle already at the very top of the page under the case study guidelines.
Is it MLA or APA?
We're going to be using APA.
Okay.
So here are the elements. Let's shrink this down just a little bit. Hold on. Scoot this over so you can see it. Here are the elements of a case study. Okay, here's the thing, here's the process we're going to go through. Identify the problem, select a major problem in the case, because there might be more than one. Which one do you think is the biggest issue? So for example, in McDonald's, there was the fact that the woman got burned. That's not the only ethical challenge or problem in the case. What was another example of an ethical problem in the case? If you guys can remember. How did it get to court? Well, they offered her money, but they only offered her $20,000. Or I can't remember the exact figure, but they actually tried to settle, but it was for a very small amount. What's that? And so they were trying to go for the legal minimum. The ethical minimum is we're going to pay whatever it costs for your medical bills because you got hurt. They didn't even do.
It's like 80,000. We're like, we'll give you 20,000 for it.
Exactly. Here's $80,000 worth of bills, but we're only going to pay you 20,000. So that's an example of one big case having multiple problems. So your first job is identify all the problems, select the major one in your mind. Suggest solutions to this problem. This is where you're going to identify different ethical models, and that's line number 3. Number 4, recommend the best solution. And I'm not going to worry about number 5. You don't have to go into details about, this one suggests you go into details about what the solution is and how it's going to work. I don't worry about that as much. Not in an essay that's about 1,000 to 1,400 words. Okay? Identify the problems, select the biggest one, suggest solutions to these problems, and then recommend the best solution. These 4 steps are the primary ones I'm looking for. Does this make sense to everybody so far? Okay. Now, the book says that there are 8 sections in a case study. Number 1, the synopsis. Outline the purpose. Describe the field of research. Outline the issues. Identify the theories and identify assumptions. Guess how long this should be? This sounds like a lot. Guess how long this should be? 1 to 2 paragraphs max. What's the key word in the description of this section?
Summary.
It's a summary. This is something that I write at the very end of the paper. Even though it goes first, it should be written at the end. Can anybody tell me why?
It's kind of like a recap over the paper.
Yeah, it's the recap. This is, now that I've written everything and figured everything out in my head, now I'm going to summarize where I'm going in this thing. This is, to use internet parlance, this is the too long didn't read version of the paper. You can't know what you're going to be writing until you've written it. So wait to do this until the very end. Does that make sense to everybody? Again, this is going to feel like it's out of order, but that's okay. So the first thing I do is write a summary. What's the second thing that I do? I write the findings, which means what? What do you think the findings in this paper are going to be? Not my evidence. These are my conclusions. This is what I determined. So the second thing, so first thing you do is you write the overall summary of everything. The second thing you write is identify the problems found in the case by analyzing the problem, supporting your findings with facts given in the case. So this is where I'm identifying what problems occur. So the problems in this case, coffee was too hot. They went to McDonald's with the bills. They refused. They offered them only $20,000, even though the bills were in excess of $80,000. So then they had to take him to court, and she won $1.4 million. So I'm going to give a brief summary of the findings or the problems in the case. Number 3. What do you think I'm going to do in this case? In number 3? I guess you did. Okay, now remember what I just talked about. We identify all the problems in the case. That's in the findings section. What am I going to do now?
State the biggest problem that you're going to be talking about.
Narrow that, all of those problems. Which one of these am I going to focus on and why? What makes this the key problem of all of the ones I identified? This is the key problem, and here's why. Notice these are not big sections. Okay? This is going to be how long? The discussion section.
Like a paragraph.
1 paragraph. I've already told you what the problems are. I'm now going to give you my argument as to why this is the argument I should focus on. This, of all the problems, this is the problem I'm going to focus on and why. Okay? Number 4, this is about a sentence long. Here is the problem that is going to be analyzed or addressed in this paper. What am I going to do in number 5?
Justify why you chose this solution.
Well, but have I told you what the solutions are yet?
State what solutions are there.
Hey, what solutions are there? Yeah. Which solutions? So, for example, I've identified the problem that McDonald's chose to ignore the ethical minimum and offer only the legal minimum. Here's how the utilitarians would approach the legal minimum. Here's how deontologists would approach the legal minimum. Here's how justice might approach the legal minimum. Here's how an ethic of virtue might approach the legal minimum. Right? So you're making recommendations. Here are different ways or different models and how they would approach this. I am going to go in and change this a little bit. I'm going to get rid of item number 6. Why? Item number 6 explains how we would actually do this. That's not the focus of this class. So you don't have to spend any time telling me how you would actually apply or do what the utilitarians recommend. Okay? All you're really going to do is explain which item you chose. Which of those, all of those models, which model do you think is the best approach and why? Does this make sense to everybody? Okay, so I will go in and edit this because we're not going to be doing that part. These next 4 documents are guides for APA setup. So if you're not clear about how to use APA, that's why I included this. This is an explanation of everything that should appear in a student paper according to APA. One of the things you're going to find that's a little different in APA, and it's going to be really useful for this paper, are what we call internal headings. Basically, you actually tell people when you move from section to section, you actually put headings in that tell them what this section is, what it's doing. So what I would be recommending is using this internal headings off of the elements of a case study. So guess what I should see when I start this section right here? I'll actually put in synopsis, or I'll put in executive summary, because that's what that section is. When I scroll down to findings, you'll see how it said findings up there, and then this bullet point right here. This section is often divided into subsections. Why is that the case? Remember, findings is when we talk about what? The problems in the case. So I might have subheadings of problem 1, problem 2, problem 3. And I put those in so that literally when I'm looking at this paper, I can flip around and find exactly where the information that I'm most interested in is. That's why we include headings. So that it literally gives us a table of contents as to what I'm looking for. I should see a heading that says discussion. I should see a heading that says recommendations. Okay? This document on internal headings explains how to format all of the different headings and types of headings that appear in a paper. Okay? If you're going to be using references, outside sources, this is an entire guideline on how to cite those both in the text and on the reference page. And then finally, when you're done with the paper, here is a list of things to look for to make sure you've covered what you need to cover for this paper. I am not going to be a jerk about this checklist. I am not an APA Nazi. Okay? I just want you guys to start getting used to using a style. Okay? I have found that APA style is used pretty commonly in a lot of the textbooks that you're using and a lot of the journal articles that you'll read and things like that. That's why I use it. Okay? Anybody have any questions?
So is this like a true research paper then, or just enough to...
It's not a research paper.
Okay.
The overall length of this paper is only 1,000 to 1,400 words. So there's not going to be a lot of room to do outside research with all the other things you need to discuss and cover. Okay? However, you might want to use sources, especially when you're saying, well, this is what utilitarians think, or how utilitarians would approach it. Here's how deontologists or how Rawls's justice and fairness would approach this. Okay? But the primary focus is just like those videos we watch. I want you to explain a situation, identify its ethical problem, and make recommendations. Yes?
Do you want us to avoid quotations and just do paraphrasing?
Well, in terms of the length of the paper, paraphrasing is going to be a lot easier than quotations. Okay, so again, this assignment is not going to be due until April 18th. But I want you guys to be aware of it now so you can be thinking about it and working on it ahead of all of the massive homework that is going to be coming in the next couple of weeks, which is sad, or it's already arrived. In fact, what I would be okay with is if we even move this an extra week to the 25th. That's the week before the week before finals exam. I'm okay with that. Because I just know that I want to give you as much room to breathe so you can set this in amongst the other assignments you've got going on. Now, there are two parts to this assignment. The first part of the assignment is what I just discussed, where you write the paper. Once you're done with this, you're going to post this paper to a discussion board where everybody else in the class can look at it. Then you're going to respond to the recommendation, meaning this is the solution I would pick. You're going to respond to the response of 3 other people in the class. So what's going to happen is the paper, like I said, I'm okay if we push that all the way to April 25th. That's when the paper has to be finished. Then we will have through finals week for you to post the comments and responses to other writing. Does that make sense to everybody? So you don't forget, so you have 2 assignments. The first is write your own case study. The second is respond to the case studies of 3 other people. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody online have any questions?
So are we going to continue having like the weekly readings and comments, etc.?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why I'm telling you now, because we are still going to be having homework all the way up until spring break. This is going to be on top of that, so I want to give you plenty of time so that you can find those little spots in your weeks to be able to work on this, because you're still going to be having to maintain the work for this class and your work for other classes. Okay? Any other questions? Again, all of this information I just covered is in the case study guidelines right up at the top of the class. Now, let's figure out how I go. Okay. All right, so now let's get started with class for today. Okay, so today we're looking at chapter 10. And if I'm thinking correctly, Winter, you're number 1.
Nice. Okay. Let's do number 14.
Number 14. Okay, go for it.
So it says, which are alternatives to traditional paths to work? And I put A and B, job sharing and flexible schedules.
Okay, why is that?
Because it says, because like the traditional is like, you know, you have your little office and you do all your work, and you like have all your assigned tasks. Job sharing is more like people kind of share like the weight of the job, and then flexible schedules is alternative because it's like instead of having like a 9 to 5 every day, you have like more flexible hours that you have more say over.
Okay. Why not unionization?
I did just look at that and kind of thought that that was also an answer. Because that's also like, instead of just having your job that you go to, unionization is like having protection. Like, from the job in a sense.
Kind of. The only argument I might make as to what, I think you're right that it's A and B. The only argument I might say for unionization is that it can be argued that unionization would say if this plant is closing down, but the company has other plants, unions might be able to say, you have to take union workers and transfer them first before they lose their jobs. The non-union workers lose their jobs first because union workers could be transferred from one plant to another and take someone else's job because of the union, the nature of a union. So the only reason I say that's an alternative to a traditional path is I apply to work at this place and I work there until I don't work anymore. Unionization might have me transferred to other places. And so I think that one's a little sketchier, but I agree with A and B. Okay, Billy, we're gonna skip you for right now. Caden, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, what would you like?
I'll do number 15.
Okay,
The term telecommuting emerged in the 1970s and describes a practice of reducing commuting at times to instead work in a specific location, such as an alternate office or an employee's home.
okay, telecommuting. So what's the difference between telecommuting and telework, do you think?
Well, telecommuting is basically just communication, like talking. Telework, you're actually doing something for the like working for the company, is what I'd say.
Okay, so the idea of telecommuting is the idea of allowing me to do work without having to travel. Telework is it's kind of an old term that we don't use anymore, but it's this idea of collaborative work where I'm able to work with other people in different locations. Telecommuting is I'm doing my job, but I'm doing it completely at home. Telework is where I'm actually collaborating with somebody else in synchronous time, but in different locations. Can you guys give me some examples of what telework might look like? A Zoom meeting where the work itself is happening in the communications area. Telecommuting is I'm sitting at home and I'm working on my project, but I'm still doing it in a localized place. It's just where the place is different. Telework is where I'm able to do teleconferences, or I'm able to do a Google Doc where multiple people are working on the same document at the same time. So it's a small, but it's a significant difference. Okay, excellent. All right, Kaysen, are you with us? Kaysen, going once. Kaysen, going twice. All right, Haley, we're gonna skip you for right now. Kyle, are you with us?
I am.
All right, what would you like to?
Can I do number 36?
Number 36. Okay, go for it.
There was a few reasons, but the ones that stuck out to me were the hours were more flexible at times, and that helps people balance their personal lives. There was less traveling to work, which meant less pollution, less cost in gas, and less wear on your vehicles. And then there was another it was shown to have same or better productivity with less time invested by the employee.
Okay. My brother commutes. He drives for an hour and a half one way each way to get to work. That means 3 hours of his day is spent in a car between home and work. He's not getting a lot of work productive. Well, actually, now that he rides the bus, he's able to get productive work done. But a lot of it was just spent listening to books, which is great for his personal growth, but it's not necessarily, I mean, he's not getting paid for that time. Yet he's not being able to use it with his family. He's not being able to use it for whatever he wants to do. He's simply trying to get from one place to another. He lives in Utah. And if you've ever driven with Utah drivers, that is a miserable experience. Sorry. I think even Californians drive better than Utahns, right? So, all right. Yeah. So, for example, I heard a lot of folks, when the FBI built their expansion, they brought a lot of folks back east over here to Pocatello to relocate them. And they were trying to wrap their heads around the fact that they could have homes that were within 5 to 10 minutes drive time from their home to the office. They were so used to commuting for so long that they were freaking out. And so all of a sudden they were saying, well, I'm used to driving this long. All of a sudden I can now start looking at living in Income. I can live in McCammon or Lava or even Soda Springs, and I can have homes that are 3 times the size for a half the price and not even miss. I mean, I'm already used to commuting. Heck, I can live anywhere and work in Pocatello, compared to the realities of where they live back east.
It is crazy in California. In some areas, you can have 5 miles could literally take you 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's crazy down
The traffic can really be that problematic. All right. Thank you, Kyle. Cattell, you're up.
Okay, I'm going to pick number 2.
Number 2.
Thank you. Some companies like Facebook have opted for workplace campuses in the traditional office spaces. My comments, this just takes me back to, in other countries in ways that bring people a little concerned, but it is nice to have that. The problem is I see maybe people never leave, or then it's so much easier for your employer to make you work all the time because you're right there.
Yeah, when I was really, really young, I lived in Sacramento, and I knew that one of the major aerospace companies went and built their own recreation center right outside of Sacramento so that their employees would have, it had tennis courts and swimming pools and a golf course and all of these things, so that they would be, and so they said, look, if you work for us, you get access to this as part of the company benefits, so that way you don't have to spend money on the tennis club or the golf club or any of these other things, and therefore that's a way for us to keep you. But then all of a sudden you're constantly on company property under company rules and regulations. And
this really kind of, I don't know if I should bring it up, but it brings me into a lot of things like from Russia, because they built these little small cities and towns, and that's what they did. Also owned by one person. So everything with your money, your employer in every way, form you can think of is making money.
Yep.
On and really keeping you right there.
Okay. Yeah, but the idea of a workplace campus, for example, Idaho State is a workplace campus. We not only, so we provide you with your work area, we provide medical care for you, we provide food options so you don't have to leave campus in order to be able to eat. We provide recreation facilities. We try to do everything on campus to keep you here because it's convenient for them. And like you said, it's creating a closed campus, which allows us to make sure that we're keeping all the money in-house, but it does increase the convenience. I mean, not having to drive home to get lunch is a really nice thing for me.
There's a lot of perks and pluses.
There are, yeah.
It does kind of drive you a little crazy though. been in here for so long. I'm like, break. Okay.
Fair enough. Okay. All right, Andrew, we're going to skip you and go to Sam. Sam, are you with us?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm gonna do question 37.
Number 37. Okay, go for it.
Says, what are benefits and detractors of workplace campuses? So benefits include the like the snacks, climbing walls, places to work out, just places to eat, so on and so forth. Then detractors would be having to be on campus more often, or feeling like you're stuck there, which could be an imbalance in your work life.
And the pressure for if you, for example, say to your boss, I'm going to leave campus to get lunch, well, you better make sure you're back here on time. Whereas, look, we have these restaurants here so that you can go on campus, which increases the likelihood you'll be back in time, you'll be productive, things like that. So there are pluses and there are benefits and detractions from it. Excellent. Okay, Logan, are you with us?
Yes.
All right. What question would you like?
I'm gonna do 41.
Okay.
So should telecommuting be more or less widespread? So I think undoubtedly it would be more widespread, especially in our current situation after the pandemic. I think it makes certain aspects of life easier and some jobs will stay remote. As for should it be more widespread, I think yes, as long as it has some benefit and isn't just for convenience.
Now, when you say convenience, who are you for whom is the convenience exist?
So
Should
like
it be
either students or employees, I think it goes back to like wants versus needs. So is it a want just because it's convenient to you, or is it basically a need because it possibly boosts productivity of employees or students?
okay? So yeah, so there are some real challenges here, and I think the pandemic has made this question much more prevalent. And you hear a lot of workplace psychologists that are saying, for example, there is a real danger when you are working in the same place where you live that it's difficult to separate the two. That there is significant benefit in the social interaction that occurs in different locations. It allows people to compartmentalize a bit what they're doing so that when they leave one's place, they can leave that. You know, we talk about professionalism in the workplace. You should leave your home issues at home, but if you're working from home, you can't. You're still literally in the middle of it. Yes.
I also brought up in one of my comments how being at home and working all the time kind of cuts you off from social interactions, like you said, but it kind of makes that skill less of a common thing among the population, I feel like, or it could potentially if everyone was working online all the time. Because I feel like it's really important to get that like social interaction at work and like get those outside rounds your ability to be social. I don't know.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I have really noticed a change in the way that I communicate with people now that I've come back from working offline all summer. You know, I was here in the fall, but my kids stayed home, and I can really see a difference in the way they interact with people because of how long they were kind of on house arrest. Okay. All right, thank you. Jackson, are you with us? Jackson going once. Jackson going twice. Okay, Anthony.
All right, I'm going to do number 1.
Number 1. Okay.
Okay, which of the following is not an alternative to the traditional office work model? And that's C, offshoring. But I also looked up the precarious, I don't know, or the precarious.
Proletariat.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that one was kind of weird. I didn't really understand that one because it's kind of like saying like if you have a problem like in public places that you could work that way, and it's kind of like it's kind of the same as remote working because you're still working from somewhere that's not on site. But then offshoring was just like having your business be somewhere else because it's cheaper overseas to like make your product.
Right. Offshoring and outsourcing are very, very similar. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, Tanner, you're up.
Sweet. I would like to do number 27, please.
Number 27. Okay, go for it.
I say it's true. Companies should have a policy in order for those that are telecommuting because you have to have clear expectations of your employees. Otherwise, it'll be abused.
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic one for me right now. And specifically, written policies regarding communication expectations. What does it mean by communication expectations?
I mean, like, I think you have to clearly state what you expect your employees to do to get done at home.
Okay. But specifically with communications technology or expectations, we're talking about if I need to talk to you, should I be able to call you at home at any time during work hours and expect you to pick up the phone?
Yeah, I believe that's reasonable. I think you have to expect to I don't know if you necessarily need to have the employee answer right away, but maybe within a certain time frame. That would be an expectation I would set. Like, hey, if I call you, I expect a phone call back within 30 minutes if possible, or a text message saying when you are available. Otherwise people are just gonna do whatever, take a nap and not answer their phone. But if I could set my own work schedule, so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna work from 8 o'clock to midnight, I'm gonna let my supervisor know that, and then they can know to when they can contact me, etc.
Exactly. And so this is what I'm finding is, for example, I can't expect a person to pick up every time I call, but the truth is, even if we're here in the office, I can't expect people to answer the phone just because I call. I have to say, look, I expect a call by the end of business. If I call and leave a message, I expect a response by the end of business.
Yeah, and
right?
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, and so the idea that companies should have written policies because it can be very difficult to balance work relationships, home relationships, and things like that if we don't establish what those expectations are. Okay, thank you. All right, Porter, you're up.
Can I do number 2?
Number 2 has already been done.
Dang. Number 5.
Number 5.
So that is, let's see, flex time is the practice of offering flexible hours. Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean?
So I think it means kind of just like they give you a set amount of work that they expect you to get done, and it's your job to manage your own time.
Yeah, so the idea is that I can work whenever I want to as long as the projects are completed within the time frames established. So like Tanner was saying, I can decide to go in at 8 o'clock until 2 o'clock in the morning if I want to, as long as the job gets done at the time that they need it finished. But I don't have to be here from 8 to 5. I come in when I want to, but I get the work done. Okay, excellent. Scott, are you with us? Scott going once. Scott going twice. Okay, we're gonna skip Zach, we're gonna skip Jack. Josh, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can I do number 29?
Number 29. Go for it.
True or false, most companies would prefer to have all workers on site in campus-like facilities. That's false. To start there, without the campus-like facilities, there's a lack of the commute, and remote workers typically have more time and fewer distractions. This doesn't apply to all workers, of course, because those that have little kids to take care of. On top of it, equipment costs are reduced because they have less people needing computers in the office.
Okay. And there's also the benefit of not having to deal with things like heating, cooling, and other physical maintenance that has to take place in a physical location because you're responsible for maintaining your own office space at home. It's always a benefit. Okay, Megan?
Can
Are
I do
you with
number
us?
18?
Number 18, go for it.
It says, what corporate culture challenge exists when employees are allowed to work remotely? And I said C, employees may slack off if not supervised.
Okay. That is very, very much true. What does that suggest, though, about the corporate culture, if C is a very big problem?
People are lazy and like it's not motivated. They're not motivated to do anything. They're gonna get a paycheck no matter what. Like if they do nothing, they'll get a paycheck. If they do something, they'll get a paycheck.
Okay, and so the problem isn't necessarily, I think, that the employees are lazy as much as the reward structure doesn't promote productivity. If I know I'm going to get paid regardless of whether I do any work or not, then there isn't any motivation to do that. So the challenge is, it's not just that employees are lazy, but the corporate culture has not been designed to improve productivity. Okay? Can we think of any other cultural issues that might arise if all employees are allowed to work remotely?
Maybe no communication between the said employees.
People might not communicate. I'll be honest. Because this class has both a face-to-face and an online component, as a teacher, I will probably tell you that I have a better relationship with students who come here physically because I know who they are. There are students that have been to class maybe once or twice. I recognize you. I recognize your work when I read it, but it's very, very possible that we would pass on the street and I would not recognize you, or you would not recognize me, because we're just not physically together and creating that kind of nonverbal relationship. Okay, it's very hard for students especially to feel like they belong to a community when that community is remote. There is no sense of cultural tradition that is created. And that can be a big problem for a company. Okay, so I have one thing I want to talk about really quickly, and then Zach has asked to talk for a little bit, and then we're going to call it a day. So I wanted to go off of something that Sam asked in the readings, which was, there is a concern about if people are working remotely, how do we deal with workers' comp claims if employees are working from home? And Sam was going, well, I don't understand how you would have a workers' comp claim if somebody was working at home. Can anybody give me an example?
You're getting on the computer all day long, all of a sudden, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to say something even more simply. I'm working at home. I get up and trip over my chair at home. I trip and twist my ankle. Could that happen? Yeah. Is the company responsible for my medical bills if I trip over my desk or trip over my chair at home while I'm on work hours and while I am doing work-related activity? It wouldn't be any different if I was in the office, but it becomes more problematic as to how responsible should the company be if I don't keep a clean house, What if I have a cramped space?
And it's also like, if you did it on the clock versus like if you were just sitting on at your desk and then you stood up when you're not on the clock, like, same thing could happen in
Yeah.
situations.
It becomes problematic because for the time that you're working, that space in your house is technically covered by your company. They're responsible for what happens during that time.
What about your house insurance? Because then there's gonna be like some kind of argument there, they're gonna say, oh no, you're on your own property, it should cover it, or your property.
Yeah, so the question, but from an ethical perspective, that's the legal argument. Should it be the company's insurance or your private insurance that covers damage to things that you're using on company time for company purposes?
Right, if that company insurance is gonna say, oh, that happened on your property.
Well, until the attorney for the individual says, but they were an agent of the company doing agent business in an authorized offsite remote activity. If they were just, so for example, if I'm a boss and I'm at home over the weekend and I'm answering work emails and this happens, even though I'm at home, I am not on quote unquote company time, but as a salaried employee, I'm engaged in work at home. My personal attorney would probably say they were an agent, a company agent at the time the injury occurred. Therefore, the company is liable for it. Gets tricky.
But there's got to be a way for the company to cover their own butts for something like that, because like I feel like people are going to be more careful at a workplace than at home. And so there's got to be some sort of clause that would protect the company. Like if I cut my finger while making lunch at home on the clock, I don't think that's justifiable for workers' comp.
Well, but the thing is if you cut your finger making lunch, are you really being an agent for even though you're on work time, are you being an agent for the company when you're making your lunch? The answer would be no, unless you are a chef working remotely to prepare food that is for a catering business, then yeah, I could. But if you're making lunch, sorry, you're out of luck. But if I'm sitting there and I'm typing on the computer, filling out an expense report, and it's in the middle of a windstorm and a tree blows through my window and hits me, which could happen, it gets tricky. But that's something that we would need to think about, especially in an environment where the authors could not have foreseen COVID, but you've got to think that these kinds of issues have come up. For example, the employee who is working remotely because they have a pre-existing condition, their boss makes them come into work and they catch COVID. Could the individual have grounds to say the company has to cover this because I was being allowed to work remotely and I was required to come in and I got exposed to COVID on the company time? These are questions that are being litigated right now, and it could be pretty hard. All right, so Zach, you had said that you had a situation that you wanted to kind of bring up during class after our questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
First of all, I just wanted to make sure everybody can hear me okay, because I don't know how stable my internet connection is.
It's good so far.
I can barely hear him.
Okay.
Can you turn it up a little, Zach?
Yeah, is this any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So, let me just start off by saying, everything that I'm about to say is it's more like second, third hand. And I know that when news travels, sometimes it can get a little iffy on some areas, but I'm just going to tell you everything that I know. And then I don't have every single fact I would like to have. I'm just kind of presenting what I know so far. So,
okay.
Next spring, I live in Jackson, Wyoming. Next spring, our airport is going to close down for 3 months, April, May, and June. They have to do complete runway renovation. They have to redo everything there, which is probably going to put more stress on like Idaho Falls Airport, maybe Casper, Wyoming's airport, potentially Salt Lake City. It kind of depends. The people that my parents know, and I've met a couple times, but I don't know them super well. This guy is a mechanic for the airport, and he's only been there a year, but he's worked his way up to be in like one of their top mechanics. But during this 3-month renovation, this guy is without a job, and they're also not going to help him with housing. In Jackson, every business has to throw in a little something towards housing, whether like the hospital owns several apartment complexes and then like only charges employees maybe $500 a month versus like their apartment around here. I have friends, their apartment is about $3,000 a month. It's crazy for a 1-bedroom apartment that they're kind of splitting on. So if you go from businesses privately owning places and renting them out, or a business may throw in X number of dollars, whatever percentage, towards housing. The whole problem is the airport, as it's closed down, they're not going to do that anymore with this mechanic that my parents know. And this mechanic, because housing is so expensive and there's really nowhere to go, he doesn't know what he's going to do as far as like if he's going to leave Jackson. And if he did leave Jackson, and let's say he wanted to come back, he doesn't know if, first of all, the housing opportunity will be there, or even if his job will be there. And it kind of seems like a messy situation. Obviously, I'm for what the company says, because it's up to the company ultimately what they do with their money. But it almost seems like they could at least try to help their employees out to bring them back 3 months later after the entire renovation is done. So that's kind of like where I'm stuck, because I can kind of see both sides, but I don't know technically what's ethically right.
If I could jump in, I would say unemployment. That's why it's there.
Yeah, that's the first thing.
Okay.
I would say that if we're looking at this from the class perspective, one of the first things we would say, it seems like the airport is running according to the legal minimum. I'm closing, so therefore I'm not paying anybody. I'm not legally required to pay anybody. We would then argue that there should be an ethical minimum. And what you're arguing is there should be an ethical minimum. They should, if nothing else, look, we understand you have to relocate. We will guarantee if you were employed before, we will re-employ you if you have to leave the area once we reopen. Okay, Winter?
Are they like firing the employees, like laying them off for the renovation, or do they expect them to come back? Because I think like if they expect them to come back, they should be doing more ethically to like compensate that, keep them in the area. But if they're like firing them,
yeah, there's not a lot that they can do there.
As far as I know, they're not firing them. It's just this. I mean, if the airport shut down, there's no work for them.
So they're furloughing them for 3 months.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay.
And how long have they given them a notice? Did you say this is happening next year?
Yeah, spring of 2022.
Well, that's a year for them to make arrangements for what they're going to do for those 3. I mean, if it was one thing to tell them a year from now, we're going to be closing down for this period of time, please prepare for what you're going to do. We will hopefully be able to rehire you, but if you've ever been involved in a construction program, just because they say it's going to be 3 months doesn't mean it's going to only take 3 months. There's all kinds of things that could make it 4 months, 5 months, what have you. Yeah, so I think that there is a question between ethical and legal minimums. Legal minimum says, well, and Sam hit that on the head. Well, you've got unemployment. We've provided the legal minimum for what happens if you are no longer employed. Ethical minimums would argue that there's probably more expected from the company than just, well, go and get good luck and we'll see you in 3 months. But this would be, and Zach, this is what I was talking about. This would be a classic example of a topic for a case study paper. This is a perfect example of analyzing what are the ethical challenges in this. What is the expectation for the business? What should they be expected to do in this case? Well, and here are different issues that are arising. Here's the one I'm going to pick, and here's what ethical standards would suggest I should do, right? So for example, one would say from a utilitarian perspective, Jackson Hole depends on that airport because it's primarily a tourist town, right? Its primary industry is hospitality. Having immediate access to that airport is critical for the hospitality industry. So I've got to make sure that the personnel that work at that airport will be immediately available as soon as possible to restore travel. Because say what you want, flying into Idaho Falls, flying into Casper, or flying into Salt Lake is not going to help the industry. I mean, people fly to Jackson Hole so they can have access to the Grand Teton, to Yellowstone, et cetera, so on and so forth. And so, especially considering how much hospitality has been hit in 2020, those companies are probably right on the edge of operations as it is. Anytime that airport is down, it's going to even hamper that more. So from a utilitarian perspective, the company paying more to keep those people around so that they can get the airport right back up to speed is going to benefit the entire town immediately. So from a utilitarian perspective, asking them to make arrangements for housing seems like a logical argument.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so last thing. Random numbers. We've got 18, 4, and 10. That was probably the biggest spread that we've had in a while. I was actually kind of happy with that one. So number 4 is, nope, wrong one. Wrong list. Okay, so number 4 is Kaysen, who wasn't here. Number 18 was Josh. And number 10 was Logan. Okay, so Logan and Josh get it. And number 6 is Kyle.
Oh, you got so excited.
He's the luckiest guy. He's got to gamble.
He's got to gamble.
He needs to.
Man, he's paid these random numbers off. All right, so that's everything I have for today. So just remember, we've talked about the case study. We've gone over the elements. You've got access to all that information up at the top. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Folks, the biggest warning I want to make about this case study, it's going to be April. It is going to be nice weather outside. You are going to have a crap load of homework coming from other classes. The earlier you get started with this assignment, the better it's going to be for you. I'm giving you a very wide range of time.
Thank you.
Okay, because I can tell that many of you need it. That's a lot of rope. That's either rope you use to pull yourself out of the hole, or it's rope you're using to make your own noose. Okay, I'm just being honest. I've seen this a million times. Just making that warning. Okay, that's everything I have, folks. You have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you all later.
Or I do it all this weekend.
Thank you so much.